I came home to find my front door wide open, swinging in the wind like a scene from a horror movie. My first thought? Someone's dead in there. My second thought? Wait, I live alone. And that's when it hit me. This wasn't some random break-in. No, this had Karen written all over it. Now, let me explain something about Karen. She's not just your average HOA busybody. She's the final boss of suburban micromanagement, the kind of person who probably has a spreadsheet for everyone's lawn height and a backup spreadsheet for their trash can placement. She's the self-proclaimed head of our neighborhood's neighborhood watch, which, as far as I can tell, is just an excuse for her and her friends to snoop around other people's property under the guise of safety. And apparently, my cabin was next on her list. So there I am, standing in my doorway, staring at the chaos inside. My living room looked like it had been ransacked by a pack of wild animals, or worse, a group of middle-aged suburbanites armed with clipboards and an overinflated sense of authority. Furniture was overturned, drawers were pulled out, and my carefully organized collection of training gear was scattered everywhere. It wasn't just a mess. It was an insult. Naturally, I did what any sane person would do. I checked my security cameras. And that's when I saw it. Karen and her merry band of self-righteous vigilantes breaking into my cabin in broad daylight. There she was, wearing her signature visor and fanny pack combo, leading the charge like some kind of HOA Napoleon. They were poking through my stuff, opening cabinets, even flipping through my books like they were searching for classified documents. One guy actually picked up one of my training rifles and aimed it at the wall like he was auditioning for a low-budget action movie. It would have been funny if it weren't so infuriating. And then I saw the note. Oh yes, they left a note on HOA letterhead, no less. It read, "Dear Jack, we conducted an inspection due to concerns about illegal activities on your property. Please contact us immediately to discuss compliance with HOA regulations." Compliance? Are you kidding me? You broke into my house. The sheer audacity was almost impressive. But here's where things get really good. Karen didn't just break in. She broke in because she thought I was the problem. Why? Because I'm a firearms instructor who occasionally uses my cabin for training sessions. Never mind that everything I do is perfectly legal and well within my rights as a property owner. Karen decided that guns equal danger, and therefore I must be stopped. It didn't matter that I'd never caused any trouble or that most of my neighbors couldn't care less about what I do up here. Karen had made up her mind, and once Karen makes up her mind, logic goes out the window. Now, before we go any further, let me take a moment to say this. If you're enjoying this story so far, and let's be honest, how could you not? Don't forget to like this video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to my channel for more tales of suburban insanity. Trust me, you don't want to miss what happens next. Alright, back to the story. After watching the footage and reading Karen's ridiculous note, I decided it was time to take action. But first, I needed to calm down. So I did what any rational person would do. I sat down with a cold beer and started Googling HOA laws. Turns out, and this might shock you, HOA members don't actually have the right to break into your house without permission. Who knew? In fact, what Karen and her crew did wasn't just unethical. It was straight up illegal. I also found out that Karen has been pulling stunts like this for years. She once fined a neighbor $500 because their mailbox wasn't aesthetically pleasing. Another time, she tried to get someone evicted for parking their truck in their own driveway because it didn't match her vision for the neighborhood. The more I read about her antics, the more determined I became to put an end to her tyranny. But before we get into how I decided to fight back, and trust me, that part is worth sticking around for, let me tell you how this whole ordeal left me feeling that day. It wasn't just anger. It was disbelief mixed with a weird sense of amusement at how absurdly petty people can be when given even a tiny bit of power. If you've ever dealt with someone like Karen, a micromanaging control freak who thinks they're above the law, you know exactly what I'm talking about. After the initial shock of finding my cabin turned into Karen's personal crime scene, I decided it was time to dig deeper into this HOA nonsense. I mean, who are these people? What gives them the right to act like they're running a small dictatorship? And more importantly, how did I end up living in the same zip code as someone who thinks breaking and entering is a valid form of community service? Now, let me tell you a little about this HOA. It's one of those cookie-cutter suburban organizations that started out with good intentions, keeping the neighborhood clean, maintaining property values, blah blah blah. But somewhere along the way, it turned into a power trip for people like Karen. You know the type, clipboard-wielding control freaks who think they're starring in their own HGTV show called Extreme Neighborhood Makeover. And Karen? She's not just a member. She's the president, the self-appointed queen of rules and regulations. The thing is, I didn't even know this HOA existed when I bought my cabin. It's technically in their jurisdiction, but since I'm tucked away on the edge of the neighborhood and don't have a white picket fence or a perfectly manicured lawn, I figured I was off their radar. Boy, was I wrong. Apparently, Karen had been watching me like a hawk from day one, probably with binoculars and a notebook labeled Jack's Suspicious Activities. So here's what I found out after a little research. HOAs are governed by something called CC and RS, covenants, conditions, and restrictions. Sounds fancy, right? Basically, it's a long list of rules that nobody reads until they get fined for having the wrong shade of beige on their garage door. And while most HOAs use these rules to keep things orderly, Karen uses them like her own personal Bible. If it's in the CC and RS, it's gospel. If it's not in the CC and RS, well, she'll probably make up a rule and pretend it is. For example, there's nothing in the CC and RS about owning firearms or using your property for legal business activities like firearms training. But Karen decided that my cabin was a threat to neighborhood safety because, wait for it, I sometimes have people over for training sessions. Never mind that these sessions are fully licensed and regulated or that my students are some of the most responsible gun owners you'll ever meet. Nope, Karen decided that guns equals danger equals Jack must be stopped. And here's where it gets even better. Karen didn't just rely on her own paranoia. She rallied her little HOA army to back her up. At one point during my research, I stumbled across an email thread where she referred to me as a potential threat to community harmony. Community harmony. Lady, you broke into my house. If anyone's disrupting harmony around here, it's you. But let me tell you what really set me off. Karen had been spreading rumors about me to the other neighbors. Apparently, she told people that I was running some kind of illegal militia out of my cabin. A militia? Can you believe that? Meanwhile, all I've been doing is teaching people how to safely handle firearms so they don't accidentally shoot themselves or someone else. But no, according to Karen, I'm basically starting World War III in my backyard. At this point, I knew I had to confront her. But before we get to that part, and trust me, it's worth the wait, I need to share something else I discovered during my deep dive into HOA insanity. Fines. Oh yes, fines are the bread and butter of any good HOA dictatorship. Didn't mow your lawn this week? That'll be $50. Left your Christmas lights up past January 1st? That'll be another $100. And if you don't pay up, they can put a lien on your house. A lien over grass and Christmas lights. Now, luckily for me or unluckily for Karen, I've never been fined because I don't actually live in the neighborhood full-time. My cabin is more of a weekend retreat than a permanent residence. But that didn't stop Karen from trying to find something, anything, to pin on me. She even sent one of her minions over to measure the height of my grass after a particularly rainy week. Spoiler alert, it was half an inch too tall according to HOA standards. Anyway, back to the confrontation. After gathering all this information, and calming down enough to avoid saying something that would land me in jail, I decided to attend the next HOA meeting. Now let me tell you something about HOA meetings. They're like high school student council meetings, but with more passive aggressiveness and fewer snacks. Everyone sits around in folding chairs pretending to care about things like streetlights and speed bumps while secretly plotting their next move against their least favorite neighbor. When I walked into that meeting, you could hear a pin drop. Karen was sitting at the front of the room with her usual smug expression, the kind that says, "I'm better than you because my hydrangeas are perfectly symmetrical." She didn't even flinch when she saw me. She just gave me this fake smile and said, "Oh, Jack, so glad you could join us." I didn't waste any time getting to the point. "Karen," I said loud enough for everyone to hear, "why did you break into my cabin?" The room went dead silent again, except for one guy in the back who audibly gasped like he was watching an episode of Law and Order. Karen tried to play dumb at first. "I don't know what you're talking about." But then I pulled out my laptop and started playing the security footage on full volume for everyone to see. There she was on screen, leading her little band of vigilantes through my living room like she was starring in an episode of CSI Suburbia. The best part? The look on her face when she realized she'd been caught red-handed. Priceless. But here's where things got really interesting. Instead of apologizing or admitting she was wrong, because let's be real, that would require humility, Karen doubled down. She started rambling about how she was protecting the community and how someone had to take action because nobody knew what Jack might be hiding. It was honestly impressive how quickly she went from denial to self-righteous justification. And that's when I dropped the hammer. "Karen," I said with as much calm as I could muster, "what you did wasn't just unethical, it was illegal." Then I pulled out copies of state trespassing laws and HOA guidelines proving that she had absolutely no authority to enter my property without permission. The room erupted into chaos after that. Half the people were yelling at Karen for overstepping her bounds, while the other half were trying not to laugh at how ridiculous this whole situation had become. After the HOA meeting turned into a full-blown circus, complete with Karen trying to justify her illegal break-in as community protection, I knew I had to take things up a notch. It wasn't enough to expose her nonsense in front of the neighbors. I needed to make sure she understood that actions have consequences. And let's be honest, nothing screams consequences louder than the legal system. Now, before we get into the juicy details, let me just say this. Dealing with HOAs is like playing Monopoly with that one person who insists on reading every rule out loud and then makes up new ones halfway through the game. It's frustrating, it's petty, and it makes you question why you ever agreed to play in the first place. But here's the thing, if you know the rules better than they do, you can flip the script. And that's exactly what I was about to do. So, step 1 in my revenge plan? Research. Lots and lots of research. I spent hours combing through HOA bylaws, state trespassing laws, and even federal property rights regulations. Turns out, Karen's little inspection wasn't just morally questionable. It was straight up illegal on multiple levels. For starters, HOAs don't have the authority to enter private property without explicit permission from the owner. And even if they did, they'd need a warrant or some kind of legal justification. Not just Karen's gut feeling that I was suspicious. But here's where it gets even better. Not only did Karen violate trespassing laws, but she also violated HOA rules by acting unilaterally. According to their own bylaws, any action taken by the HOA has to be approved by a majority vote from the board members. And guess what? There was no vote. Karen had gone rogue. Probably because she knew no one else would actually support her ridiculous vendetta against me. Armed with all this information, I decided it was time to confront Karen again. This time with an audience that really mattered. Law enforcement. Now, I know what you're thinking. Calling the cops over HOA drama sounds extreme. But trust me, when someone breaks into your house and tries to pass it off as community service, you have every right to bring in the professionals. So I filed a police report detailing everything that had happened. The break-in, the security footage, Karen's note, and even her behavior at the HOA meeting. The officer who took my report looked equal parts amused and annoyed, like he couldn't believe he was dealing with suburban drama instead of actual crime. But hey, trespassing is trespassing, and Karen was about to learn that lesson the hard way. Now here's where things started to get interesting. A few days after filing the report, I got a call from a detective who wanted to follow up on the case. Apparently, Karen had been involved in other incidents around the neighborhood. Nothing as extreme as breaking into someone's house, but enough to raise some eyebrows. She'd been accused of harassing neighbors over minor infractions like fence heights and mailbox colors. And there were even rumors that she'd threatened to fine someone for having too many garden gnomes in their yard. Garden gnomes. Can you imagine? Anyway, after reviewing my evidence, including the security footage, the detective agreed that Karen had crossed a line. He told me they'd be contacting her for questioning and possibly issuing a citation for trespassing. And let me tell you, knowing that Karen was about to get a visit from law enforcement felt like sweet, sweet justice. But I wasn't done yet. Oh no, this was only phase 1 of my plan. Phase 2 involved taking Karen down on her own turf, the HOA itself. Now remember how I said Karen violated HOA rules by acting unilaterally? Well, turns out that little detail gave me grounds to file a formal complaint against her with the board. So I did exactly that. I submitted a detailed report outlining everything she'd done wrong, complete with copies of HOA bylaws and state laws proving my case. And because I'm nothing if not thorough, I also included screenshots of emails where Karen had slandered me to other neighbors. The board scheduled a special meeting to review my complaint, and let me tell you, it was glorious. Karen showed up looking like she'd rather be anywhere else in the world, while I walked in with a folder full of evidence and a big smile on my face. The other board members listened as I laid out my case point by point. How Karen violated trespassing laws, how she acted without board approval, and how her behavior reflected poorly on the HOA as a whole. By the time I finished speaking, Karen looked like she wanted to crawl under the table and disappear, which honestly would have been an improvement for everyone involved. The board ultimately decided to issue Karen a formal reprimand for her actions and strip her of certain privileges as HOA president, including her ability to make unilateral decisions without board approval. It wasn't quite the public humiliation I'd hoped for, but it was still a win, and it sent a clear message that Karen wasn't above the rules. But wait, it gets better. Remember how Karen spread rumors about me running an illegal militia? Well, those rumors ended up backfiring spectacularly when several neighbors came forward to defend me during the meeting. Turns out they actually appreciated having someone around who knew how to handle firearms responsibly, and some of them even asked if they could sign up for training sessions at my cabin. So there you have it. Not only did Karen get knocked down a peg or 10, but her attempt to paint me as the neighborhood villain ended up boosting my reputation instead. And honestly, watching her squirm during that meeting was worth every minute of research and preparation it took to get there. Now, if you're sitting there thinking, wow, this sounds like something straight out of a sitcom, let me assure you, it absolutely felt like one while it was happening. But unlike most sitcoms where everything magically resolves itself in 30 minutes or less, this was real life, and real life comes with consequences. For Karen, those consequences included losing her grip on power within the HOA and getting slapped with legal trouble for trespassing. Karen getting reprimanded by the HOA board was satisfying, sure, but let's be real. It wasn't enough. Not for me, and certainly not for Karen. Because if you think someone like her is going to take a slap on the wrist and gracefully step back, you've clearly never met a Karen before. Oh no, this woman doubled down. And when I say doubled down, I mean she went full Karen mode, emails, complaints, and even a surprise visit from the local police. Yeah, we're going there. Let me set the scene for you. It's a sunny Saturday afternoon at my cabin, and I'm in the middle of a training session with a group of students. We're outside on my property, completely legal, by the way, practicing basic firearm safety drills. Everyone's wearing ear protection, we're following all the rules, and honestly, it's about as wholesome as a firearms class can get. But then I see it. Karen's car creeping up my driveway like a shark circling its prey. Now, I don't know what she was expecting to find, maybe a black market bazaar or some underground bunker, but what she got was me standing there with a clipboard and a group of very polite students who looked more like accountants than action heroes. She gets out of her car, marches over like she owns the place. Spoiler, she doesn't, and starts yelling about how I'm disturbing the peace and endangering the community. Mind you, we're on private property in the middle of nowhere. The only thing we're disturbing is maybe some squirrels. At this point, my students are looking at me like, is this part of the class? And honestly, I couldn't blame them. Karen was putting on quite the show. Arms flailing, voice raised to that glass-shattering pitch only Karens can achieve. She even tried to pull out her phone to record us, probably hoping to catch something incriminating. Joke's on her though, because all she got was footage of me calmly explaining that what we were doing was perfectly legal and that she was trespassing. Again. But here's where it gets really good. About 10 minutes into her tirade, 2 police officers show up. Apparently, Karen had called them before driving over and claimed there was an active shooter situation at my cabin. An active shooter situation. Can you believe that? Meanwhile, we're standing there holding unloaded training rifles and going over safety protocols like it's Safe 101. The officers get out of their car looking confused but professional. You know, that we've seen everything kind of vibe, and start asking questions. Karen immediately launches into her spiel about how I'm running some kind of dangerous operation that's putting the entire neighborhood at risk. She even tries to hand them printouts of HOA bylaws like they're going to arrest me for violating Rule 7B. Thou shalt not annoy Karen. But here's where it backfires spectacularly. One of the officers recognizes me. Turns out he'd taken one of my classes a few years ago and knew exactly what kind of operation I was running. A safe, legal one. He listens to Karen for about 30 seconds before turning to me with this look that says, "I'm so sorry you have to deal with this." Then he asks if I have any proof that what we're doing is above board. Oh boy, do I have proof. Not only do I have all my permits and certifications neatly organized in a folder, because I'm nothing if not prepared, but I also have copies of state laws that explicitly protect what I'm doing on private property. So while Karen is standing there fuming like a kettle about to boil over, I calmly hand over my paperwork and watch as the officers nod along. And then comes the best part. They turn to Karen and tell her she's trespassing again, and that if she doesn't leave immediately, they'll have no choice but to issue her a citation. The look on her face? Priceless. She sputters something about just trying to protect the community, before stomping back to her car and driving off in a huff. Meanwhile, my students are trying not to laugh because let's face it, this whole thing feels like an episode of Cops. HOA edition. Now you'd think that would be the end of it, right? Wrong. Because Karen isn't just persistent, she's relentless. Over the next week, she sends out multiple emails to the entire neighborhood accusing me of being a danger to public safety and demanding that the HOA ban all firearms-related activities within its jurisdiction. Never mind that such a ban would be completely unenforceable. It wasn't about logic, it was about control. But here's where things start to shift in my favor. People are fed up with Karen's antics. Remember how some neighbors defended me at the HOA meeting? Well, now they're coming out in full force. Emails start circulating, countering Karen's claims and pointing out all the ways she's overstepped her authority over the years. One guy even includes screenshots of text messages where Karen threatened to fine him for having an unapproved garden shed. It doesn't take long for momentum to build against her. By the time the next HOA meeting rolls around, it feels less like a neighborhood discussion and more like an intervention for Karen's behavior. People are standing up one after another, sharing stories about how she's harassed them over minor infractions or tried to enforce rules that don't even exist. And then it happens. Someone proposes a vote to remove Karen as HOA president altogether. The room erupts into applause, not because everyone agrees, though most do, but because it feels like justice is finally being served. The vote passes overwhelmingly. Karen is officially dethroned. And let me tell you, watching her pack up her clipboard and storm out of that meeting was one of the most satisfying moments of my life. But here's what really stuck with me. After everything that happened, the break-in, the police visit, the emails, I realized something important about people like Karen. They thrive on power trips and control because deep down they're terrified of losing relevance. And while it would have been easy to write her off as just another suburban busybody gone rogue, seeing her finally held accountable reminded me that sometimes justice isn't just about winning. It's about restoring balance. So yeah, maybe this whole saga wasn't exactly how I planned on spending my weekends. But hey, at least now I've got one hell of a story after Karen was officially dethroned as HOA president. A moment that felt like the suburban equivalent of the Berlin Wall coming down. I thought the drama was finally over. I mean, what else could she possibly do? She'd been publicly humiliated, stripped of her title, and exposed as the neighborhood's #1 menace. Surely, this was the end of her reign of terror, right? Wrong. Because Karen wasn't done yet. Oh no, she had one last trick up her sleeve, and let me tell you, it was both ridiculous and absolutely hilarious. So here's what happened. A few weeks after the HOA meeting, I get a letter in the mail. And not just any letter. It's from Karen's lawyer. That's right, Karen had lawyered up. The letter basically accused me of defamation and emotional distress, claiming that my actions had irreparably damaged her reputation within the community. Damaged her reputation? Lady, you broke into my house. If anything, I'd say she did a pretty good job of damaging her own reputation without any help from me. Now, I'm no legal expert, but even I could tell this was a desperate move. The letter was full of vague threats about lawsuits and demands for compensation, but it didn't actually cite any specific laws or evidence. It was basically Karen saying, "I'm mad at you and I want money." Classic Karen. Naturally, I did what any rational person would do. I called my own lawyer. And let me tell you, my lawyer loved this case. He practically laughed out loud when he read Karen's letter and said something along the lines of, "This is going to be fun." Turns out, Karen didn't have a leg to stand on legally. Her claims were baseless, her evidence was non-existent, and her lawyer, well, let's just say he wasn't exactly Perry Mason. So we drafted a response. And when I say response, I mean we absolutely shredded her argument point by point. We cited trespassing laws, HOA bylaws, and even included copies of the police report from when she called them with her fake active shooter claim. By the time we were done, Karen's case looked about as solid as a Jenga tower in an earthquake. A few days later, Karen's lawyer sent another letter, this time backing off completely and saying they wouldn't pursue legal action after all. Translation: they realized they were fighting a losing battle and decided to cut their losses. And just like that, Karen's last-ditch attempt to take me down fizzled out like a bad fireworks display. But here's where things took an unexpected turn, in a good way this time. After all the drama with Karen and the HOA, word started spreading around the neighborhood about what had happened. People who'd never even spoken to me before started reaching out. Some to offer support, others just curious about my firearms training classes. Apparently, Karen's attempt to paint me as the villain had backfired spectacularly and turned me into something of a local hero. So I decided to lean into it. I sent out an open invitation to everyone in the neighborhood for a free firearms safety workshop at my cabin. No strings attached. My thinking was simple. If people were curious or even skeptical about what I do, why not show them firsthand? Plus, let's be real, it was also a great way to rub it in Karen's face just a little bit more. The day of the workshop rolls around, and let me tell you, the turnout was incredible. People showed up with their families, their friends, even their dogs, which wasn't exactly part of the plan, but hey, I wasn't going to complain. Some were genuinely interested in learning about firearm safety. Others just wanted to see what all the fuss was about after hearing Karen's wild accusations. And then, because life has a sense of humor, Karen herself showed up. Yep, she actually came to my workshop. At first I thought she was there to cause trouble again, or maybe try to gather more evidence for one of her ridiculous claims. But no. She showed up with her husband and sat quietly in the back like she didn't spend months trying to ruin my life. Now look, I'm not one to hold grudges. Okay, maybe sometimes. But seeing Karen sitting there awkwardly while I explained basic firearm safety felt like poetic justice. She didn't say much during the workshop, just nodded along like she was trying to blend in. But afterwards she came up to me and said something that honestly shocked me. "Jack, maybe I misjudged you." "Misjudged me? Lady, you called the cops on me. But hey, progress is progress." So yeah, somehow this whole ridiculous saga ended with Karen attending one of my workshops and admitting, sort of, that she might have been wrong about me. And while I wouldn't exactly call us friends now or ever, it felt like closure in its own weird way. Now before we wrap this up, let me just say this. If you've ever dealt with an HOA nightmare or had your own run-in with someone like Karen, you're not alone. These kinds of people exist everywhere. Micromanaging busybodies who think they're above the rules. But here's the good news. They can be stopped. Whether it's through legal channels or just standing your ground when they try to push you around, there's always a way to fight back. And hey, if nothing else, you'll probably end up with a great story to tell. Alright folks, that's it for today. If you enjoyed this wild ride through HOA drama and suburban insanity, make sure to hit that like button, share this video with your friends, and subscribe to my channel for more tales of revenge and ridiculousness. And don't forget to drop a comment below. I want to hear your crazy HOA stories too. Thanks for watching, and remember, never underestimate the power of petty revenge.